reminds him that he is a human. This means that despite all this, he might not be able to learn much due to his low level of insight on mana. With that out of the way, they finally begin their training. Meyer instructs him to attack her with all he has got. He can use any combination of spells he wants. Following her instructions, he starts preparing spells in both of his hands. What happens next leaves him astonished. In your right hand, you are preparing a water sphere, while with your left hand, you will shoot a gust of wind, Meyer tells him. He is left shocked to see that she was able to predict the exact spell he was going to use even before he employed it. He once again attempts to attack her. This time he plans to use an earth spell. Once again, Meyer is able to tell what he's up to. She informs him to stop since she would prefer it if her garden doesn't get ruined. He is left completely confused. Meyer reveals that this is an ability that Art possesses as well. If he can learn to tap into the depths of his realm heart ability, this would be a piece of cake for him. With those words, they continued their training. Days soon turned to weeks since they started. Their training is similar to the training with Cordry. He would spend hours getting beat up, followed by a time of healing using Meyer's healing arts. She continues her lessons on how to interpret mana fluctuations while healing him. Art is astonished to see how well she is able to heal him. "Wouldn't it have been easier to just cut my legs off and grow me new ones?" he asks her, wondering why she went through all that trouble if her healing is so good. Meyer responds by telling him that using ether past a certain threshold comes at a cost. It would have been possible to heal his legs, but she would have had to extract mana from something or someone else. This would have resulted in their death. Art makes a lighthearted comment telling her to stop beating him up if that is the case. Meyer carries on the same energy, telling him to stop falling for her feints if he doesn't want to get beat up. During their training, Art always tries to predict her next move, but he always comes up short. Meyer informs him that it is because he is getting ahead of himself by trying to counter her spell even before she manifests it. This is something that took her decades to get right, and even that was considered fast by an Azura's standard. Now that Art is all healed up, they start their training once again. Both of them manifest their realm heart, and Meyer starts the fight with a wind bullet. After weeks of training, Art has started to somewhat get the hang of using realm heart. He is able to predict her attack and manages to block it. She immediately follows it up with an earth spell. Once again, Art predicts the incoming earth spike and jumps out of the way in time. While in the air, he notices red particles forming behind him. He comes to the conclusion that Meyer is about to use Blast Flare next. He instantly forms an ice spell and turns around to counter it. However, it turns out to be another feint. She uses a simple earth bullet to finish the fight. However, just as it is about to pierce him, a hand moves in to catch it. This hand belongs to Winsome, who has come to inform them that their time is up. Upon seeing Meyer, he quickly gets down on his knee to greet her. Art is a bit surprised to see this. By now he had also deduced that she must hold some level of influence in the Indrath clan since she was able to keep him with her for this long. But for Winsome to bow to her, he has to wonder just how much authority she truly holds. Winsome apologizes for his intrusion and explains that Lord Indrath has already arranged for Art's next instructor, and it's time for them to meet him. Meyer responds by telling him that she understands and also compliments Art for doing well in his training with Realm Heart. She also remarks that she would like to pop by from time to time to keep an eye on the boy. Winsome is surprised to hear this, but he quickly responds, informing her that it's no issue. With that said, Winsome and Art depart to meet this new instructor. As they walk, Art notices that Winsome has been staring at him for quite some time. He asks him if something is wrong. It's just that he's amazed that Lady Meyer not only healed him, but also decided to train him personally. Who exactly is Meyer? Art asks him. Winsome sternly points out that it's Lady Meyer. In response to this question, he states that he's not in a position to confirm it unless she tells him directly. Art makes a snide comment, implying to him that he thought Winsome must be some high-up figure when they first met, but that doesn't seem to be the case. He gets angry and replies harshly, "Watch your tongue, human. Even if I were the lowest of the Azuras, I'd still be stronger than any of you less races." After walking for a while, they finally arrive at a portal. As soon as they reach the other side, they are greeted by a sound boom as a huge crater is formed. Winsome explains that so far Art has learned Mon interpretation with him and Lady Meyer, and he learned augmented melee combat with Cordry. In this phase, he will learn to fit everything together into a cohesive style. Their conversation is interrupted by a voice, so this is him. Art notices a figure standing on top of a ledge. The voice continues speaking. This whelp is supposed to be the hero who leads Decathlon to victory. The figure, which appears to be a man, leaps from the ledge at great speed. He crashes into the ground, creating a cloud of dust. A huge hand suddenly emerges from the dust cloud and grabs Art, lifting him in the air. It seems that Art's new teacher is a man who can transform into a huge golem. He stares at him intently without doing much. It's as if he is observing Art. After some time, the golem releases him from his grip. Soon after, the golem begins to crumble away. From within its core, the man emerges once again. Winsome introduces him as Ren. He reveals that Art will be training with him for a while, so they should get acquainted. Art respectfully bows to him, however. Ren pays him no attention and speaks to Winsome instead. What's the punishment for being tardy in human society? A severed finger or toe, perhaps? It must be more along the lines of imprisonment or social isolation. Art is taken aback by this weird man and his crazy talk. From the way he looks, it's obvious that he is planning to use the same punishment on Art. Fortunately for him, Winsome tells him that there is no punishment for being late. Ren is a bit surprised and annoyed at the same time. He finds it odd that a race with such a small lifespan doesn't place more importance on their time. He comes to the conclusion that humans must be a backward race. Art finds it weird coming from him when he is the one dressed like a crazy person. Ren quickly turns around, slapping Art in the face with his robe. After walking a short distance, he turns around and with a serious look on his face he says, "Arthur, I want you to strip." He is left completely speechless, but judging from everything he has seen so far, it's hardly surprising. He takes off his clothes without questioning this ridiculous demand. Ren notices Sylvia's feather wrapped around Art's arm. He becomes intrigued and quickly snatches it away. He starts examining it and remarks that such a rare material is wasted as just an arm warmer. Art is confused, but Winsome explains that their feathers have unique properties about both mana and aether. From the day a dragon is born, they never shed their feathers, so for one to deliberately give their feather to someone signifies trust and affection. Art becomes happy upon hearing this as he recalls the time he spent with Sylvia. His thoughts are interrupted by Ren as he makes another ridiculous demand. Without any explanation, he tells Art to stand still with his arms spread out. He once again quietly does as he is told. Ren starts examining every part of his body with much intrigue. After he is done, he moves on to the next phase of his examination. He instructs Art to use a basic spell using each element while only using his right hand. He follows through with these instructions while Ren closely observes every single movement that he makes. It takes all day, but Ren finally completes his basic calculations. As the sun begins to go down, Art starts to feel cold. However, Ren is still not done with all his measurements. He moves on to the next phase yet again and instructs Art to use his mana arts in battle. Without giving him any time to think, Ren forms a giant golem, and it starts charging towards them. Art quickly fires a lightning spell, which destroys it. However, it reforms itself and continues charging. At the same time, another golem suddenly appears behind him. It swipes at his legs, making him fall down and fail the test. This makes him realize that Ren is one of those people. Frustrated by his weirdness, Art tells him that he would be more cooperative if he only knew what Ren was trying to figure out with all these measurements. He completely ignores him and continues on to the long-range mana manipulation analysis. Art suddenly hears a roar. This is followed by the appearance of hundreds of golems on top of the cliff. They start climbing down to attack. Art is amazed upon witnessing this. "Just how many golems can you conjure?" he asks. Ren nonchalantly replies that it depends on the complexity, but for this type, he can conjure a few thousand or so. Art releases his realm heart in preparation to counter the incoming golems. He jumps high up in the air to cast his spells. As soon as he is close enough, he launches a powerful lightning attack, destroying many golems at the same time. He continues the aggression without any break. When the dust settles, Ren can see that Art has destroyed all the golems without breaking a sweat. He is impressed but quickly moves on to the next test. This time it's a physical test, so he asks Art to bring out his primary weapon. He takes out his sword and throws it to Ren, but for some reason he becomes really surprised upon seeing it. Soon after he breaks out into a laugh. Art assumes that he is laughing because he thinks Art is using a stick for a sword. He explains that it's not as simple as it seems and offers to show it to him. However, Ren quickly pulls it back saying, "I know what it is, boy." He starts to pull it out. Art explains that he won't be able to unsheath it as he is the only one who can do so. Before he can finish his sentence, he's left stunned as he witnesses Ren successfully pull out the sword. He begins to question how the instructor is able to pull out a sword that he has bonded with. In a surprising turn of events, Ren reveals that it was he who made this sword. Art is left shocked upon hearing this. His mind is filled with questions. Assuming that he did forge this sword, how did it end up in Decathlon? While swinging the blade, Ren reveals that Dawn's ballad was meant to be an experimental weapon. It was more or less a failure. While on an expedition to gather minerals, he tossed the weapon in the beast's glades, thinking that no one would be able to tell if it was anything more than a black cane, much less try to open it. But to think that it somehow ended up in Art's possession. He's surprised to hear him say that Dawn's ballad was a failure. He has never seen a finer blade in either of his lives. Ren feels a bit insulted that his weapon is being compared to the primitive weapons of the lesser races. However, he lets that slide and starts examining the sword. He explains that he made this sword as a one-size-fits-all kind of weapon, so it came out to be nothing more than a sharp tool. Winsome steps into the conversation and asks Ren what he will do now that he has met him. Art is left confused by what he means by this question. Winsome responds, telling him that he brought him here for two reasons. The first is, as he mentioned earlier, for Ren to be his instructor and help him get stronger. Art is shocked upon hearing the second reason, which is for Ren to make him a weapon. He is startled upon hearing that he will forge him a sword. Ren angrily replies, "I don't forge swords, brat. I create them." Unfortunately for Art, Ren reveals that he only agreed to train him because he owed a favor to Lord Indrath. However, this favor doesn't extend to him wasting his time making a sword for a lesser being. He decides to hold on to Dawn's ballad for now. In all honesty, Art is amazed that Ren is willing to give it back at all. He tells Art that the Dawn's ballad might be a simple tool, but it still chose him to be its wielder. He may not be proud of this particular fact, but he is not just going to take it away. Despite all his weirdness, it seems he has great pride in his weapons. Ren holds out his left hand and the ground beneath it suddenly starts to move, as if it were boiling. A magnificent sword suddenly appears from the ground and into Ren's hand. He tosses this sword to Art and tells him that he can use this while training. This would be perfect for training as he created it to measure the movement of the user, as well as the force of the impact it receives. After swinging it around for a bit, Art is left stunned by its quality. Ren also asks Art to give him Sylvia's feather as well. He becomes a bit concerned, but Ren tells him not to question everything he does and just give it to him. This feather is really important to Art as it was a gift from Sylvia. Although with some hesitation, he does as Ren asks of him and hands it to him. After getting the feather, he tells the boy to get some rest. Art doesn't like the idea that they will be spending the whole night in this barren crater. It only becomes worse as Ren reveals that they won't be spending the night here, it will just be him alone. As Winsome opens a portal for them, Ren remarks that he can just think of it as training, since there won't be any fluffy beds waiting for him in the war. With that, the two of them walk into the portal, leaving Art by himself in this huge crater. Some time passes and it's finally nighttime. Art makes a tent for himself using earth magic. Despite the situation, one cannot deny the beauty of the night sky. As he is sleeping peacefully, he is woken up by a rumbling sound. He makes his way out of the tent to investigate. Out of nowhere, a golem suddenly emerges from the ground carrying a giant axe and attacks him. He is barely able to dodge. Ren, standing on top of the cliff, shouts instructions to Art, revealing this to be a training simulation for the war. Once again, he instructs him to strip and begin fighting. Art does what he says and activates his realm heart in preparation for the incoming attack by the golems. His objective is to defeat the golem generals. They are marked with crowns on their heads. Art finds himself completely surrounded by them. Despite their numbers, they don't seem to be very strong, and he's able to hold them off using his magic and combat abilities. Having said that, numbers still matter as Art soon finds out. While he is distracted, one of them attacks him from behind. Just when it seems like the attack would land, it is suddenly blocked by a shield. This shield is carried by a white golem. More of the white ones show up and help Art fend off the black golems. Since this is a simulation, Art has allies similar to the backers he will have in the real war. However, Art will still be the main player, so it will be up to him to decide whether he wants to take the offensive and destroy his enemies or stay near his teammates and protect them. After a long battle, he eventually manages to kill the golem leader and ends the fight. Ren instantly comes down to inform him of the results. The total number of casualties on Art's side was 271, while the number of enemy casualties was 512. Although it was a victory, Ren doesn't consider it to be an impressive performance given the low level of the golems. Art lets too many of his allies die. He responds by telling him that he can't feel any empathy for them since they look like golems. This is why he didn't feel motivated to protect them even though they were on the same side. Ren makes a note of this and tells Art to go back to sleep, warning him that tomorrow isn't going to be any easier. Sleep deprived, he instantly falls asleep the moment his head touches the ground. The next morning, he is woken up by another sound. This time it's the scream of a girl. Art quickly gets up and prepares his sword. He is horrified to realize that his enemy this time is a demon, similar to the one that killed Lancelia. What's more horrifying is the fact it's holding Tessia in his hand as a hostage. In an attempt to save her, Art unleashes his static void. As he rushes towards the demon, he is able to see all the different mana particles in the air. He charges at the demon with his sword and manages to cut his hand off. This frees Tessia from his grip, and she falls to the ground. However, the threat is not over. Realizing this, he continues his attacks on the demon and quickly backs up to put some distance between them. He regenerates his hand and prepares a powerful counterattack. As soon as the demon unleashes it, Art is able to block most of the arrows using his own spell. However, one of the arrows escapes and heads straight towards the unconscious Tessia. Art uses static void to freeze time and is able to catch the arrow before it hits her. He throws the arrow back towards the demon. However, just then, his realm heart runs out, leaving him completely exhausted and without any mana. It hits the demon and creates a big blast. When the smoke clears, it is revealed that the demon is completely unharmed. Just as it's about to kill both of them, Art shouts, "Ren, enough of this." The demon suddenly starts melting, revealing itself to be nothing more than a puppet created using earth magic. The same goes for Tessia. Ren appears from behind the cloud of dust. He is surprised that Art was able to catch on so quickly. However, it's hard not to catch on when the scenario is so obviously fake. Ren claims that he did what he did for Art's benefit. He blames Art for using most of his energy to try to save Tessia. This left him exhausted and defenseless. Art gives a stern reply telling him that there are things that are more important to him than anything else, including himself. However, Ren's cold and logical nature doesn't understand this. He tells Art that although familial bonds and mates are important, they can cost you your life in battle. However, he is interrupted as Art becomes embarrassed and rushes to clarify that Tessia isn't his mate. This leaves Ren confused. From what he was told by Winsome, and judging by his reaction, he was sure that her importance went beyond mere infatuation. "You two haven't yet engaged in carnal intimacy?" Ren asks him, leaving Art totally embarrassed and at a loss for words. He quickly changes the topic to something less awkward. He asks him about his ability to create dummies. While creating a throne for himself using earth magic, he reveals that he can single-handedly create all sorts of scenarios. However, there are limitations to what he can do. For example, he cannot mimic the properties of water using earth. The big question lingering on Ren's mind is how Art was able to tell that the earlier scenario was fake. He reveals that he was able to see the yellow earthen mana particles all over the demon and Tessia. More importantly, it made no sense for a demon to bring Tessia to Epiotis. Similar to Ren, Art has a question lingering in his mind as well. He asks him if it's impossible for lesser beings to have the same level of insight about mana arts as the Asuras. Ren is a man of numbers and statistics, so it goes against his nature to deem it impossible, but at the same time, it is highly improbable. However, he remarks that Art of all people shouldn't be worried about that. He is left confused by what he means. Ren explains that Art is a collection of statistical improbabilities. He is a quadra-elemental mage, which is the very thing that is needed to use Aether, which happens to be the very thing that the Princess of Dragons bestowed upon him. Everything about him is an outlier. Not even the Asuras have so much innate talent and luck. Art thanks him for pointing that out and asks him about what they have to do next. Before moving on to the next phase of their training, Ren asks him to put out his dominant hand. He takes a triangular purple rock and explains that it's a mineral called achlorite. Although it's a rare mineral, it is useless on its own. However, with the right refining and synthesizing process, it can be turned into something amazing. He reminds Art of when he said that he doesn't forge swords, but he creates them. With this mineral and the right tools, he can essentially grow a weapon. Art gets confused and compares it to growing a tree. Ren becomes exasperated and remarks that he can think of it like that if that's what it takes for him to wrap his lesser mind around the process. He reveals that normally he spends years or even decades observing and analyzing the fighting style before he creates a weapon. By doing this, he ensures that it's perfectly suited to each wielder. However, in Art's case, that's not possible. He takes the triangular rock and out of nowhere, he suddenly stabs Art with it. While he is screaming in pain, Ren explains that he has synthesized the achlorite with Sylvia's feather, as well as a piece of her scale. Every moment, action, thought, and change in his body will factor into how the weapon will manifest. This means that even Ren can't predict how the weapon will turn out. Perhaps it won't be a sword at all, and will turn out to be something completely different. This makes Art question why they are doing it this way if the outcome is so unpredictable. On top of that, he thought Ren wasn't going to make him a weapon. He wonders what caused his intentions to change. Ren responds by telling him that he will need more than a stick to win against Vritra. More importantly, they are running out of time. Art becomes horrified to hear that last part as he was told by Winsome that they still had 2 more years before the war began. With a grim expression, Ren reveals that Winsome just received the latest update about Decathlon. Before disclosing it, he makes it clear that he is telling him this against the wishes of Winsome and Lord Indrath. The reason he is doing it is because he wants Art to make a logical decision based on correct information. The Accelerate is unpredictable. There is no telling when it will manifest as a weapon. It could be a year or perhaps more. Art becomes increasingly anxious as he can tell that Ren is on edge, even more so than usual, as he finally reveals the information that they got. Although the main army hasn't arrived yet, the war between Alakria and Decathlon has already begun. Art becomes horrified. He is angry that he was lied to by Winsome. Ren clarifies that the nature of war is unpredictable. Art immediately makes the decision to go back to Decathlon. If the war has begun, then he needs to fight to protect his family and his loved ones. As he is walking away, he is suddenly forced to stop as his legs won't move. It's because of Ren's earth magic. He creates 2 giant golem hands to grab his leg to stop him from leaving. What will you do when you get back? Get yourself killed by a scythe. He questions Art angrily. He tries to make the case that he has been training with the Aether Orb all this time. Despite saying this, deep down he knows it himself that he is nowhere near strong enough. At his current level, he probably can't even defeat a retainer, let alone a scythe. In a surprising turn of events, Ren says 1 year. Give me 1 year and you'll actually have a fighting chance. Art grits his teeth. Unable to form words, he just nods. Back in Decathlon, in the floating castle of the council, Virion is working hard for the war. Tessie requests permission to fight as well. However, Virion instantly turns her down, telling her that she is not strong enough. Alder agrees with his assessment. He points out that sending her out in the field is much too risky and quite unnecessary. Tessia grits her teeth in frustration and leaves the room in anger. Virion lets out a deep sigh of exhaustion. He questions Alder if this is really the best call. He reminds him that she means a lot to Arthur Lewin. If they were to let her join the battle, then it might impede Art's judgment and he might want to come back. Elsewhere in the castle, Tessia is still frustrated and makes her way to the portal. She is stopped by the guards protecting the gate. She orders them to open the door and let her pass. However, they tell her that they haven't received any information about this from Virion or Lord Alder. Suddenly, Lance Viray arrives and orders them to let her through. She covers up for her and tells them that she is running errands with her. Following her order, the 2 guards open the gate, revealing a huge portal behind it. Another soldier appears and greets both of them. He asks them about their destination. Tessia tells him that they are heading to Etistan City. It was once the capital of Sapin. This city was built on the western coast of the continent. This made it out of reach of the Dwarven and the Elven countries. It also made it the furthest city from the Beast Glades in the human country. Now that the war has begun, it has become the furthest city from the battle, and the ideal defensive location as it is hard to access, with 3 of its sides bordered by the ocean. When the war was announced to the public a year ago, King Glader tore the city down and rebuilt it to be the last line of defense against the Alacrian army. The city is now completely different from what it was a year ago. There are armed soldiers walking through the streets at every corner. Tessia and Lance Viray arrive at the city. She tells Tessia to keep her sword ready at all times. This is because they are at war, and she should always be ready for the worst-case scenario. Tessia asks her how the Glader siblings are doing in their training. She asks this because she knows that the 2 lances representing the humans have been put in charge of training the human prince and princess. Viray answers by telling her that Curtis is determined and hardworking, but his progress has been slow. His comprehension of mana is average at best. This is despite the fact that he is a beast tamer. Princess Kathleen, on the other hand, is doing well. After all, she has always been more gifted than everyone else. Tessia reminds her that there is one person that surpasses even her dad. She needs no further explanation, as she instantly knows that Tessia is talking about Art. She wonders what sort of a person he will be after he returns from his training with the Azuras. Looking at all the soldiers wandering around, She wonders if the Alacrian army can make it all the way here. The council found out from Cynthia that Alacria is to the west of Decathan. This means the Etistan is technically the closest city to Alacria. However, Cynthia also told them that they had no effective way of transporting their army across the ocean. This is why they have to use a more discreet method of using the teleportation gates hidden throughout the Beast Glades. Using this method, the Vritra can bring in a huge army and keep it hidden in the dungeons until they are ready to strike. Tessia recalls how most of their information has come from Cynthia. She had a curse upon her that bound her from revealing any information about Alacria. Although Alder was able to partially lift this curse, she still ended up comatose after revealing what she knew. This war has caused a strain on her relationship with Virion. But at the same time, Tessia understands that she is not the only one who is frustrated. After the death of the Graysunders, the dwarves launched a rebellion. Virion and the council had to work hard to regain their allegiance while encouraging individual cities to prepare for military action. While she is lost in thought, a strange figure slowly makes its way towards her. Upon realizing this, she instantly pulls out her sword and pushes this person to the ground. However, she soon realizes that it's Emily. Upon seeing Tessia, she quickly gets up and gives her a big hug. She apologizes to her for knocking her to the ground. Emily assures her that it's fine. In fact, it was kind of fun for her in a slightly terrifying way. Emily suddenly realizes that she doesn't have time to be dawdling around. She is on an important errand to deliver some papers to Gideon. He had even requested aid from a lance. Tessia instantly glances toward Lance Foray. With a bright smile, she requests Lance to let her come along. The three of them make their way to Gideon. While on their way, she notices that Emily seems to be down. To cheer her up, she gives her a light bump on her shoulder and asks cheerfully, "So what are you and the professor working on nowadays? I haven't seen you around the castle lately." Emily lets out a deep sigh and tells her that calling that nutjob of a professor is a bit of a stretch. She goes on about the countless times she had to pull him out of the rubble after he caused an explosion. She gives Tessia a similar bump and asks about her own life these days. She goes on her own little rant, telling her how suffocating it's to be inside the castle. Emily gives a sarcastic reply, "Oh sure, the halls are so narrow, and the ceiling is practically right over your head inside a castle." Both girls start releasing their pent-up frustration. Emily talks about her weird master, while Tessia complains about Alder and her overbearing grandfather. They both shudder while thinking about their situations. Despite this, Emily tells her not to be so hard on Commander Virion. Their concern about her is understandable after how she was taken by Lucas last year. Tessia understands what she means. The past year has been difficult for all of them. The only way she can reassure herself that she is getting stronger is by training constantly. However, with the latest attacks by Alacria, she wishes that she could be on the battlefield and be more useful. Next, Emily inquires about Arthur. There has only been one news about him since he left. They have heard it so many times by now that both of them are able to mimic Alder at the same time. They continue their chat as they walk towards Gideon's location. Eventually, Emily asks about Elijah. This is difficult for her as she sort of blames herself for his capture. She informs her that there has been no news of him. Even after all this time, they still don't know why he was taken alive. Their conversation is interrupted as Lance Ferret informs them that they have finally arrived. The location is a bunker. They make their way down and eventually come across a huge door. Emily presses the two buttons on it and starts saying something. It sounds like gibberish, but perhaps it's a secret password of some sort. After a few minutes, the gate opens and the trio enters. They are greeted by a horrible stench. However, Emily is used to this by now and isn't bothered in the slightest. They finally arrive at Gideon's office. Before they can enter, they are greeted by a servant. As they are speaking, Gideon quickly rushes over and starts going through all the papers that Emily is carrying. He starts throwing away all the unnecessary reports, trying to look for the one he wants. When he finds it, he quickly starts reading it while ignoring everyone around him. After going through it, he lets out a sigh as if something is wrong. He finally speaks up, telling Lance Ferret that he submitted a formal request to the council, but since she is already here, he would like her to accompany him. Lance inquires about where they will be going. Much to the shock of everyone, he reveals that they will be going to the heart of the battle, on the northern border of the Beast Glades. Some time passes and the party of 5 is now headed to an unknown location in the Beast Glades. Gideon tells everyone to be on high alert. After riding on their horses for a while, they finally arrive at their desired location. Tessia is shocked to see that they are standing on a cliff just over the Decathius. This is the same ship that Gideon was building all those years ago when he got the blueprints from Art. The party makes its way to the beach, and they start getting closer to the rundown ship. Upon closer inspection, Tessia realizes that it's not the Decatheus, but Gideon remarks that it's something worse. They make their way inside the ship, and he starts inspecting everything as if he is looking for something. Tessia is filled with questions right now. Who built this ship if not Master Gideon? When did it even set sail? Where are all the people who were on it? She notices Lance Verret going through some drawers. After examining everything, she reveals that everything on this ship has been destroyed. This was deliberately done by something to hide the clues of the ship's origin. Someone obviously wants to hide their identity. Emily begins to wonder if Gideon's blueprints got leaked. Maybe one of his competitors built this ship. Gideon quickly corrects her by revealing that this ship was submerged in the ocean until only a few weeks ago. It was just by chance that a few adventurers came across it just as the tide shifted. Emily asks, "What about the crew members? Did they all drown?" Gideon replies, telling her that there would have been some remains if that had been the case. Lance Verret starts connecting the dots. Gideon continues speaking, telling them that after he read the report, he prayed that he was wrong about his conclusion, but it doesn't seem like he was. He held on to the hope that the original Decatheus had somehow made it back in one piece. But after examining it, he is sure that this ship isn't the Decatheus. Everyone's faces turn pale as they finally realize the bone-chilling truth. This ship was built in Alacria, which means that they have an arsenal capable of carrying whole battalions across the ocean to Decathlon. Back at the castle, Varian sits alone in his office, fiddling with some sort of recording device. The burden on his shoulder has had an effect on his health. It's obvious from his face just how overworked he is. The scene shifts to the council room, where a frustrated King Glader angrily pounds his fist on the table. His frustration is the result of Gideon's report about the mysterious ship that they found. Gideon reminds the council that the part about the ship being from Alacria is just speculation. However, he's sure that the ship is not the Decatheus. Queen Priscilla questions why he is so sure of this fact. Gideon explains that the Decatheus was something he took a lot of pride in. He wanted everyone to know that it was him who built this ship. Hence, he left his marks all over the base of the ship. These marks were nowhere to be found on this new ship. In fact, its frame is constructed from an entirely different material. King Glader gets even more frustrated upon hearing this. After all, how can he remain calm after hearing that their enemy has an entire arsenal of battleships capable of transporting thousands of soldiers and mages across the ocean? Everyone's expressions turn gloomy as they can't deny what he's saying. Their situation was bad enough when they were having trouble sniffing out the enemy from the dungeons, but now they also have to worry about an attack from two ends. Alder stops the argument and calms everyone down. He calmly asks Veri about her thoughts on the matter. She agrees with Gideon. The lack of evidence was telling enough, but now it can't be denied. Queen Priscilla tells everyone that it could be a trap, a way to split their force and make them move further into the Beast Glades. However, Alder suggests that if it were a trap, then they would have left something on the western coast instead. Now the question is whether it's worth taking the risk and splitting their forces. They have no choice but to, since the risk is too great. However, they are already short on troops and mages. This is because the dwarves still refuse to help. Virion realizes that they need the dwarves' help if they are going to win this war. Back in his office, he has finally found out about Tessia's trip to the Beast Glades. However, it's hardly startling. In fact, the most astonishing thing is that she waited this long to leave the castle. Virion summons her to his office to have a conversation with her. He wants to show her something. He brings out the recording device from earlier. It displays the projection of their most recent battle. Tessia is horrified upon seeing it. It's a battle that took place 5 days ago. Decathlon suffered major losses in this battle. Of the 400 soldiers sent down to the dungeons, only 180 made it back. Virion was the one who gave the order, and now he must live with this guilt. He tells her that it's his selfishness as her grandfather that makes him want to keep her safe, even though he knows that she can be an asset on the field. However, even if one has all the talent in the world, it only takes one small mistake on the battlefield. This is why Virion had forbidden her to take part until now. With a stern expression, he asks her if she wants to take part in the war even after all she has seen. Tessia gives an even more bold reply saying that she will. Virion throws her a sword and asks her to prove her resolve to him. The two of them make their way to an empty field. They are going to have a fight so Virion can judge whether she is ready for the real war or not. Both of them unleash their beast wills, ready to start their battle. Without a warning, Virion lunges towards her like an arrow. She manages to dodge this attack using the vines from her beast will, and tries to attack Virion using those same vines. However, he manages to dodge each of them using his incredible speed while slowly closing the gap between them. Tessia once again strikes him. This time she uses her sword. However, Virion is prepared for that and stops the assault using his own sword. Next, he grabs Tessia's arm and tries to smash her to the ground. She manages to save herself just in time by sprouting vines and catching herself with them. Virion is impressed to see that she has gained better control over her beast will. Their battle continues to intensify with neither of them giving an inch. Tessia knows that if this continues, she will lose because of her lack of experience. Hence, she decides to go all out and uses the next phase of her beast will. Virion becomes concerned that she has lost control again, but he is left astonished to realize that that's not the case. Despite tapping into the next phase, she is in complete control. Both of them release powerful strikes with their swords. They both realize that this will decide who will come out victorious. As they continue to exchange blows, she loses the battle of stamina as her beast will starts to run out. Virion makes perfect use of this opportunity and lands a powerful kick. He quickly pins her down to the ground, ending the fight with a victory. She is left disappointed as she couldn't land a single clean hit. To her surprise, Virion tells her that she cannot address